early on. You might have even seen some climate legislation. He was one of the rare Republicans now who took climate change quite seriously. I'm not saying we would never have had Obama, but maybe the election of McCain would have delayed the kind of descent of the Republican Party to the point where it wound up nominating somebody like Trump, who's a threat to liberal democracy, in my view, for a few more cycles. And maybe it would have happened, but maybe Trump would have been too old by that point. And I do think there's something very specific about Trump and his sort of peculiar political gifts that mean that America might have headed down a different path if he hadn't wound up getting the nomination of one of the two major parties. And then the other thing I like about this alternative scenario is that we could have saved Obama for when we really needed him, like in the next election, where in 2024 we're quite likely to see Donald Trump run again, faced with, in my view, a relatively weak Democratic opponent. And that scenario alarms me. And just to finish, the last species of regret I have is a regret for the failure of a kind of politics, which is my politics, and I suspect the politics of lots of people here, which is this view that if you're a reasonable person, you can disagree with somebody else and find compromise, and that having good policy really matters, because Obama had all of that, and it didn't work out that well. If you read his book, which is magnificent, by the way, it's full of a pervasive sense of the limits of this kind of reasonable kind of politics that he embodied. So I have real regrets that politics failed. I don't like what we've got instead. I think Obama's an admirable man. His administration did some good things, but I have huge regrets about his presidency, and that's why I'd like you folks to all join me in backing the motion.
Thank you very much, John, for navigating what is quite a tricky tightrope of an argument to walk as an Economist editor. We come now to the first speaker for the opposition tonight, In-Jae Lee. A keen debater, In-Jae placed first in the debate in one of the Sun Invitational debate tournaments, becoming one of the largest debate tournaments in Florida, second in the Yale University Debate Invitational. He won this lot through open audition. In-Jae, the floor is yours. Is the microphone on? Yes.
So thank you so much for the introduction. I actually didn't tell him those debate credentials that he just mentioned. I'm not sure how he discovered those. I guess the internet, but is everybody ready?
I don't think the mic's working.
Mic's not on? My microphone's off. Do you have to press a button or something?
Okay, there's some exciting improv we can do here. Either we can wait for a microphone. How likely do you think it is we're going to get a microphone to work? Okay. How confident are you to go sans mic?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, I guess I'm going without the mic then. I might as well take this off then if that's all right.
Go for it.
It's on. It's on now.
It just started working. Oh, it just started working. All right, 1 second. My friends that are watching are probably thinking this is really typical. All right, is it working now? All right, sensational. Is everybody ready? Perfect. So I'd like to actually begin this speech by discussing not Obama, but another American politician, and also the great American pastime. Bernie Sanders was born in Brooklyn in 1941 and grew up a fan of their local baseball team, the Dodgers. He was there in '55 when the Dodgers witnessed their greatest triumph against my team, the New York Yankees, in the World Series, which is what we call our championship. But then 2 years later, his heart was broken in '57 when the Dodgers decided to abandon their local fan base in Brooklyn and move for bigger checks to a more lucrative fan base in Los Angeles. The interesting thing is, Bernie Sanders says that he doesn't regret this move or the backstabbing of the Dodgers against the entire borough of Brooklyn, because he realized at that moment how little big corporate organizations like sports teams and corporations care about the little guy, the common folk that sit in the stands and cheer against the players. And that's when Bernie Sanders decided to enter a career of politics and public service so that he could actually fight the big guys like Amazon, like Microsoft, and of course like Major League Baseball. Now, you Brits probably don't understand how seriously we take baseball in the States, and as a Yankees fan, I personally couldn't give a damn where the Dodgers play as long as they keep losing to the Yankees. But I will say this, Senator Sanders is right in one way. The American people, in their political approach, need to do something which I would call regret less and repair more. So in order to understand why we shouldn't regret the Obama years, let's first consider what we could mean by regret. This House would regret the Obama years, firstly, if we believe that they did more harm than good. Secondly, if we failed to address certain issues that could have been addressed, or as the member of the proposition before me called them, missed opportunities. Third and finally, we'd regret the Obama years if we believed that Trump's election was actually enabled during the Obama years, even by Obama to some extent. Now, regarding the first count, it's actually undeniable that there was significant, unprecedented progress made during the Obama years. Let's remember three things. Firstly, Obama was elected during the greatest economic crisis since the Great Depression, pre-COVID. Secondly, Obama was also the most leftist and progressive president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Third and finally, the American political spectrum is significantly more to the right than perhaps any other Western country in the world. I'd argue that many Democrats are probably more conservative than the Tories in the United Kingdom, which I will bring up again later. Now, with all of this in mind, let's take a look at some of Obama's achievements, which I'm sure my colleagues and later speakers will discuss more, but I'll just give you a quick rundown. On the economic side, thanks to Obama, America saw 10 years of consecutive economic growth from 2010 to 2019. We added 8.1 million jobs to the economy, and we also increased the GDP per capita to $59,000. For those of you that don't want to do the math, that's about 43,000 quid. I searched it up on Google earlier. So there was all of those achievements, but then again, we also saw income inequality decrease on net. Dodd-Frank was passed to regulate the banks, and the Consumer Financial Protection Board was also created for the first time in American history. And there were other domestic achievements. Let's not forget that it was during the Obama presidency that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, allowing gay Americans to serve in the military without hiding this integral part of their identity. In fact, the Supreme Court actually decriminalized gay marriage during the Obama years. And of course, we also saw other important achievements like DACA, Obamacare, his signature achievement, be passed during the Obama years. Foreign policy, there's lots of more criticism, which I think is very valid regarding Obama and his foreign policy. But let's also remember this. In 2008, Obama inherited a flaming hot pile of, let's be polite and call it mess, from the Bush administration. In 2008, we saw that majorities in Britain, France, Germany, Korea, South Africa, Brazil, to name a few countries, disapproved of Bush and also disapproved of American leadership of the world. In 2016, we saw that supermajorities in Asia, Europe, relative majorities in Africa and Latin America once again approved of not just President Obama, but also of American leadership and its role in the world. These accomplishments, other foreign policy achievements like the Iran nuclear deal, the Paris Climate Accords, and of course, the beginning of the pivot to Asia, a recognition that Asia is where the future of geopolitics lies, those are all undeniable aspects of Obama's legacy that shouldn't be underestimated or neglected when we're assessing Obama years and the Obama presidency at large. Now, of course, there are plenty of criticisms. For example, many people say that Obama let Russian power grow in the Middle East, that he was too accommodating to authoritarian governments around the world, and also that we saw a failure to create a lasting climate change policy agreement. Now, of course, those are also bleeding into the chief criticism of Obama, that he didn't do enough. There's the criticism that Obamacare wasn't the equivalent to the NHS or universal health care. There's the criticism that university tuition is still really expensive in the United States. And of course, there's also the criticism that Dodd-Frank didn't break up the big banks. All of those are very valid, especially when we're discussing the reality of the American situation in 2021. But let's take a reality check and look at what America was doing a couple of years prior during the Obama presidency, because hindsight is 2020. Once again, I stress that Obama is arguably the most progressive and leftist presidents we've ever had, even considering Joe Biden. And you also have to remember a certain tenet of Obama's character, which I'll explain in this way. Sorry, another baseball metaphor is coming in. When Jackie Robinson became the first black Major League Baseball player, he faced a lot of discrimination. For example, members of other teams and even members of his own team, the Dodgers, refused to play with him. But the reason he persevered and the reason so many black people play in Major League Baseball today is because of the fact that Jackie Robinson didn't just have the courage to fight, he had the courage to know when not to fight. He picked his battles wisely, and he also ensured that he built up support within the American public for black players within Major League Baseball. Similarly, we have to remember Obama, as the first black president, had to navigate the political ballpark within America very cautiously. Just as the member of the proposition mentioned, let's not forget that many people in America actually accused the president of being not an American, but an Islamist agent from Kenya. And before you dismiss those people as crackpots, remember that one of those crackpots did become the next president of the United States. So clearly there was a big racial dimension that Obama was facing as president, and my colleague did mention this, and he actually argued that the racial backlash actually worsened during the Obama years. But the thing is, when you consider the Obama years, you're considering the 8 years, the only time in American history that the United States had a non-white black president. The racial dimension is central to the dimension of the Obama years. To live in the Obama years means to live in an unprecedented time racially for America. The racial backlash was inevitable, but the fact that it was accelerated within the Obama years, the fact that it came during the Trump years, shouldn't be considered a harm. It should be considered a positive that having a black president in the White House that was built by slaves finally forced the United States to begin reckoning with its ugly racial past that continues to reverberate even to this day. That's a benefit, not something we should regret, of the Obama years. But regarding the other missed achievements, for example, that he didn't achieve good healthcare, the fact that he didn't really create lasting climate policy, let's also remember the serious opposition that Obama faced within Congress, not just from the congressional Republicans, but from the conservative Democrats. Conservative Democrats like Manchin were the only reason that the Democrats had a near supermajority in the Senate. Those conservative Democrats joined the Republicans in refusing to play ball with Obama to create significant progressive legacies. That's the reason why so many opportunities were, per se, missed, but they weren't really missed if they are the reality of the political situation. We have to remember that. And we also have to remember how much opposition Obama faced to the measures he did get passed: Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, the Iran nuclear deal. Even Democrats are criticizing those as going too far. But if those are going too far then, we're wrong to say that they didn't go far enough today, because that was the reality of the situation back then. As a leftist myself, I do wish more could have been achieved within the Obama years, but we have to recognize the hallmarks and the barriers that prevented Obama from going as far as he wished to. Now, while we're discussing Obama's legacy, I do think it's inevitable that we talk about Trump. So let's go through a quick rundown of some of Trump's abandonments and accomplishments. He abandoned Syria and Afghanistan. He also let Russia have their own way, which led to such actions as Russia attempting to assassinate Sergei Skripal not 3 hours from Cambridge over in Salisbury. And we also saw that he openly embraced dictators. He called Egypt's al-Sisi a good friend of his, and he congratulated Xi Jinping on Twitter when Xi declared himself president for life of China. That's almost like me congratulating the Red Sox for eliminating the Yankees during the best-of-4 playoff season in baseball. Sorry for the baseball reference. I'll try to stop it now. But here's the thing. When we look at what Trump has done, some people, like the member of the proposition, might say that the reason Trump was elected was partly because of Obama, because of the conservative and racial backlash. I'd argue that there are many factors that go back throughout American history. Let's take a look at American history and some of the factors that Trump took advantage of to win. The first one, globalization, trade of China, the outsourcing of jobs to East Asia. That didn't begin with Obama. That began with the first Bush and the Clinton administrations with their neoliberal economic policies. You could even argue that it began when Nixon decided to go to Beijing to begin the détente with the communist powers. The other issue that Trump liked to exploit, rising inequality and the weakening of the unions. I have just one word for that: Reagan. Third and finally, the war on terror and also the draining international commitments America has abroad. Those didn't begin with Obama. Obama inherited two massive failures of wars. Those began not just with the Bush administration that started those wars, but this whole policy began when the Cold Warriors of the 1950s to 80s started planning coup d'etats and invasions abroad like they were just someone's birthday parties at the office. American military intervention has long had problematic traditions, and it wasn't Obama's fault that he inherited so many of these issues that Trump eventually exploited. We also can't blame Obama for not anticipating these events when nobody else in the political spectrum did. Nobody else foresaw that trade of China would become such a huge issue that Trump could take advantage of. Nobody else thought that the loss of the factories and the industrial sector in America would lead to so many white Republicans voting for Trump, even despite some of the rather abhorrent things that he said. At the end of the day, we have to remember that just because we blame Obama for Trump doesn't mean that it was Obama's fault. If we're going to blame Obama for Trump, we should also credit him for the many accomplishments that he did achieve in such limited, difficult scenarios. We should also credit Obama for the rise of the leftist and progressive movement that the relatively liberal years during 2008 to 2016 allowed to create. AOC, Bernie Sanders, many of these leftists who are now a significant force in American politics would never have actually become such a serious force if they weren't allowed to grow and mature during the Obama years. We have to keep in mind that that's the force that's going to continue to propel itself in American politics. Let's be real. Most Republicans are old and white, meaning that they're going to die eventually. Most Democrats, most progressives are young. They're going to be able to participate in politics. Hopefully, they'll become the leaders of politics and the American electoral system someday. And that's one of Obama's greatest legacies, this subtle but inevitable leftward shift. If the racial reckoning was inevitable, so was this leftward shift. Now, when asked if we should regret this notion, if we should regret that Obama was the president, if we should regret the things we weren't able to achieve during the Obama years, all I'm going to ask is that this House does not regret, but rather reconsider, and that this House doesn't rue, but rather we repair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Injay. Now, I should at this point firstly remind everyone that we would encourage you across all of these speeches, and I'm sure our other speakers tonight won't thank me for saying this, but encourage you to make points of information throughout someone's speech if you feel you object to what has been said. For now, however, what I would like to do is turn our attention to floor speeches and ask if there is anyone upstairs or down who would like to make, to start off with, a speech, a short 1 to 2 minute speech in proposition of the motion tonight. Do we have any volunteers for that? There's a hand over there. If we could hopefully have a working microphone, that would be extremely exciting.
Testing.
Oh.
Do I do name and college as well?
Oh, name and college would be lovely. You're an expert.
Josh Hack at Peterhouse as well. So I would like to argue in proposition of the motion tonight, simply because I think this House should regret the Obama years, on the ground that they expected the extraordinary and they got the ordinary. Obama
Thank you very much. Now, do we have anyone who would like to speak in abstention? A hand immediately. You're for opposition. All right, okay. Anyone who would like to go in abstention tonight? We'll go over there on that side if that works.
I'm Jake from Queens. The main reason I'd like to speak in favour of abstention tonight is because to say one either regrets or doesn't regret is very fine, it's very one thing. And to say that you don't regret the Obama years completely misses out everything you did do that was very poor. So it amazes me that no one's mentioned the consistent drone striking of children in Yemen yet, but I assume someone will mention it at some point tonight. And the tens of thousands of incarcerated black people for massively petty crimes under our resident girl boss, Vice President Harris. And, but also, similarly, to say that you don't regret anything implies that you just ignore the good you did, inherited one of the worst economies America's ever seen, a financial crash, and just completely changed it. It brought so much good to the country. But to say either side completely misses out, as my friend over here said, to treat him as some sort of mythical figure who solved all of America's problems is just wrong. And I agree, there were lots of missed opportunities, but there was lots of stuff done wrong as well as done right. So to say either way, I think you'd be wrong to do it. So that's why I'm arguing in favour of abstention.
Okay, and finally, do we have anyone who would like to make a speech tonight I mean, we have some sort of, this man is very eager, so we'll go here for an opposition speech. Name and college.
Is it on?
Yeah. What's your name and college, though, please?
My name's Nick. I'm from Homerton College, and I'm a first-year student here. I'd like to start off by saying that I'm very pleased that both sides tonight have critically engaged with the notion of regret. I've been frustrated with the Obama administration. I've been disappointed with the Obama administration. But to say that I regret the Obama administration is a bit of a leap too far for me. And the reason it is because the word regret implies that you would have rather surrendered yourself to the next plausible historical alternative. And that would have been, as one of the speakers already rightly pointed out tonight, a McCain and Sarah Palin-led administration. And what this administration would have had is it would have shared all the moral failures of the Obama administration. It would have shared all the practical failures of the Obama administration, the drone strikes, the carelessness in Libya, etc. But what the McCain administration would not have shared is the victories of the Obama administration, the passing of Obamacare, the passing of DACA, etc., etc., etc. And I think what's also important when considering this counterfactual history, would it really have been wise, after 8 years of moral failure and incompetence from George W. Bush, to have ennobled that Republican Party? Would it really have been wise to place Sarah Palin in the seat of vice presidency? But most perniciously of all, and I'll end on this, is the worst part about this counterfactual history is that it would have shown and signalled to Democratic Party strategists that if you put a black man up for the presidency, he can't win. And that would have made those self-interested Democratic strategists more and more likely to be less inclined to promote people of colour who are excellent into positions as candidates. And I can say as someone who comes from a college with the first black man as the head of a Cambridge college, Homerton, that would have been a moral tragedy and a failure. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we could slowly coalesce back down to normal volumes of chatter, that would be quite helpful, just because I'd very much like to hear from our third speaker tonight. Dr. Julie Norman is a lecturer in politics and international relations at University College London. She is the Deputy Director for the UCL Centre on US Politics. Julie is a frequent guest on the BBC, CNN, Bloomberg, Al Jazeera, Euronews, and she has published widely in the Washington Post, Huffington Post, and various other places, as is written out on your order papers. Julie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. As the opposition has noted, we also acknowledge that Obama inherited office at a very difficult time, an unprecedented economic crisis, 2 wars, and the unprecedented situation of being the first Black American to hold the office of president. As the proposition has also noted, many of us had very high hopes for Obama despite these challenges. The truth is, though, Obama underperformed and failed to meet expectations, including, by all accounts, his own, in terms of policy, politics, and polarization. That paved the way for Trump's election and also for a more divided America that we still see today. As the opposition rightly noted, not all of this is Obama's fault, but that is the reality of the Obama years, and that is what the proposition regrets. I'd like to start with policy. The opposition noted that Obama really ushered in the economic recovery, and that is true. He prevented an even worse economic crisis from taking root in the United States. But even members of the Democratic Party to this day are lamenting the slow pace and scale of that recovery. If you followed any of the news coverage of Biden's COVID relief bill this spring, literally every article referred to lessons learned from the Obama administration, from Obama's own aides and transition officers and congressional leaders. So there was much frustration among Democrats among that speed and among that scale. Indeed, we usually see rapid growth after a recession. The opposition noted that GDP did recover. Under Obama, though, that GDP recovery took over 3.5 years, almost Obama's entire first term in office. Compared to the other 11 recessions since the Great Depression, that's much higher than average. Usually recovery is in just over 1 year. Likewise, under Obama, it took 6 years for those jobs to be recovered, which the opposition pointed out. 6 years, compared to an average of just 2 years after all previous recessions. It wasn't just the speed, though, it was also where this recovery took place. The vast majority of the jobs that were recovered were specifically in the service sector and specifically in large urban metropolitan areas. And what this meant is that rural communities, especially those that relied on manufacturing, were left behind during this recovery for much longer than many of the urban population. The one exception, of course, was the auto industry, which Obama did rightly bail out. But the fact of the matter is that most working-class Americans saw bailouts going to the big banks while they felt they were being left behind. The opposition also noted that inequality had decreased during this time. In fact, the rates of poverty were going up. The number of people on food stamps under Obama increased from 28 million to about 45 million. So again, this recovery was felt, and again, this was across urban, rural, and across different racial divides. The opposition also rightly noted the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Again, very important legislation from the United States, but again, was considered, even by Obama's own party, something that didn't go far enough. The administration also bungled Obamacare in terms of how the process went forward. Even though most provisions were popular, the administration didn't communicate it well to the electorate. Some of us here may remember Speaker Pelosi's famous soundbite from that time period where she says, "We have to pass it so you can find out what's in it." That's slightly taken out of context, but that pretty much sums up the Democrats' messaging at that time. It was very foggy, it was very murky, and really no one knew what was in it until it was ready to be passed. This allowed the GOP to mischaracterize the bill as it went through these series of debates and delays. So if you see hashtag death panels, that's when all of this was taking place. When the ACA actually passed, it didn't do well in terms of its rollout. There were numerous glitches, but more the content of the policy simultaneously managed to go too far for conservatives and not far enough for liberals, as the opposition has rightly pointed out. Even though 20 million more individuals are insured in the United States, 28 million still are not insured. And what that has done is it has created an ongoing issue that's continuing to split the Democratic Party itself and how to deal with this problem, as well as create an ongoing rift between the GOP and the Democrats. Furthermore, all this political energy that went into passing the ACA, we're doing that during that crucial 2 years when the Democrats had over a supermajority in the Senate and could have passed much other meaningful legislation on issues like immigration, race, LGBT rights, climate, gun rights, but instead all that political capital was spent on a health care bill that was seen as substandard even by its own party. The opposition also mentioned foreign policy. Again, these wins proved very short-lived. The Iran nuclear deal was quickly undone by Trump, as was signing the Paris Climate Accord. Yes, Obama succeeded in killing Osama bin Laden, but as we know, the Afghanistan war went on for yet another 10 years. And during all of this, the administration just proved to be rather tone-deaf to both the real and the perceived impacts of what globalist policies meant for the working class, specifically by leaning into trade deals like the TPP and continuing these costly foreign interventions. So the transformative progressive policies that the opposition referred to didn't really take root in a meaningful, sustainable way under Obama. And that's just half of the coin. Obama promised transformational policy, but he also promised transformational politics. But when it came down to it, Obama was not able to remake Washington. He miscalculated his ability to be able to work with the GOP. The opposition rightly pointed out this was largely due to the Republican Party itself simply refusing to play ball from day one with Obama. But the Democrats didn't seem to expect that intransigence and didn't really have a strategy to overcome it. Furthermore, for Obama, despite his rhetorical commitments to compromise, reaching across the aisle, lacked often the personal relationships with Congress to make that happen. At other points, he overpromised on bipartisanship, leant in too far, almost to a fault, such that he looked weak when he had strength among Congress, and he had to strong-arm, mainly through executive orders for some of the policy issues that the opposition pointed out when he lacked that majority on Capitol Hill. So despite Obama's aspirations, he couldn't control growing polarization of Congress, but even more so polarization of the electorate, which continued to become more split not only on policy issues, but increasingly on identity issues, which I think we're all familiar with. Education, class, race, urban-rural divide. Those divides became deeper and wider under Obama. The opposition rightly noted these did not start with Obama, and they were not completely Obama's fault, or even mostly Obama's fault. But the fact was, Obama and the administration did not know how to deal with this situation. What ultimately happened was Obama lost the support of much of the white working class in particular in terms of voting for Democrats, and that is what ultimately led to Trump's election, particularly in the Rust Belt states, which have been crucial to Obama's victory in both 2008 and 2012. Indeed, it's estimated that 13% of Trump voters voted for Obama in one or both of the previous elections. Obama had more support from that demographic in 2008 than any other recent Democratic candidate at 40%, and that nosedived by 2016 for Clinton. Of course, again, this is not all Obama's fault. Clinton and Trump were their own politicians and had their own campaigns, but the fact was that many white working class voters who had supported Obama felt disillusioned and left behind during the Obama years, and that ended up tipping the scales for Trump in 2016. It's important to note at the same time, as has been mentioned, Democratic progressives were also disillusioned by Obama and maintained Obama didn't do enough. The opposition says that this has propelled the progressive wing of the party, and that is true, but it has also led to very deep rifts within the Democratic Party, which is currently disabling them from being able to actually make meaningful change in legislation on Capitol Hill while they have this limited majority. So despite campaigning as the opposite, both the right and the left were ultimately able to paint Obama as an elite, as a globalist, and as an institutionalist, mobilizing populist sentiments on both sides. Thus, despite Obama's best intentions, the proposition regrets that the Obama years paved the way for Trump and for a further polarized electorate. This does not preclude us from trying to repair, but it does mean that we regret and repair at the same time. Thank you.
Well, we now come to our second opposition speaker of the night, Ewan McCaskill, who, as your order papers note, was The Guardian's chief political correspondent, diplomatic editor, Washington bureau chief, and defence and intelligence correspondent over a career at The Guardian lasting 22 years. As a White House correspondent from 2007 to 2013, Ewan covered Obama's election, his first term in office, his re-election, and the start of his second term. Ewan, the floor is yours.
As one of the speakers from the floor said, I'm really grateful to the speakers so far. They have really engaged in this and had a proper debate so far. I share a lot of there's a lot of consensus on both sides. I share a lot of the regrets of the Obama years. I regret it wasn't radical enough. I regret some of the foreign policy decisions. I regret that Obama embraced the notion of American exceptionalism, the idea that America is somehow better than the rest of the world. On a personal level, I regret that Obama cracked down on whistleblowers, leakers, and journalists, including me. Obama cracked down on journalists and whistleblowers more than any other US president in history, at least up to Trump. So I'm not some sort of starry-eyed admirer or apologist for Obama. But having said that, do I regret the Obama years? I certainly don't. We've sort of listed some of his achievements and his failures. I always thought the achievements outweighed the failures. If we were having this debate, say, a year ago, Obama's policy successes might look a bit thin because of what Trump hated Obama for whatever reason, maybe that White House correspondent dinner, which I was at, when he roasted Trump, and Trump, being such a narcissist, never quite got over it. So when Trump came into office, he started to dismantle as much of Obama's policies as he could. But what we've seen with Biden is a lot of Obama's policy achievements being resurrected, consolidated, like Obamacare, and hopefully we'll get another Iran deal, and we'll see Obama's policy, the true perspective. Even if Obama hadn't achieved anything, the fact that America elected the first African American is a good enough and sole reason just not to regret Obama's presidency. So a couple of speakers have said that this motion is ambiguous. I think it's dangerously ambiguous. We can sort of agree that, about whether we regret they didn't do enough or whatever. But it's ambiguous in a dangerous way. If you were to vote for this motion tonight, that would be that you regret the Obama years. That can easily be read as you regret the Obama presidency. Now, I wouldn't be if you do that. It wouldn't surprise me if some conservative right-wing website in America picks it up and says students in Britain have declared the Obama presidency a matter for regret. Maybe it's fanciful. You could even imagine Donald Trump, assuming he stands for president again, saying, those students at Cambridge, super smart, smartest students in the world, and look what they've done. They voted to regret that Obama was president. Okay, that might seem fanciful, but are you going to take that risk tonight? Just to raise some of the points, John, just a small point, and Julie raised it as well, the missed opportunity of Obama's first 2 years. I was in the States at the time and I covered this. It wasn't just the Republicans. Part of the reason Obama didn't get as much done, for me, I would have rammed through everything I possibly could in those 2 years, and I wish he had. But it wasn't just the Republicans that blocked him. The Democratic Party at that had a fiscal bloc of Midwest conservatives. A lot of them were to the right of the Republican Party. And there was those fiscal conservatives that constantly blocked Obama on his economic reforms, on Obamacare and others. That's what made it difficult. So the idea, I think you have to sort of slightly qualify the idea that he was reluctant or got bogged down in the first 2 years and that it was a missed opportunity. I was really uneasy with the point John made about the fact that America voted for Obama led to a sort of flight of racially motivated white working class into the Republican Party. I'm really uncomfortable with that argument, because what you're saying is you shouldn't elect an African American in order not to antagonize the white working class. As an argument, then you just sort of pander to racists by not electing Obama in the first place. I mean, there's a sort of dangerous logic to that. Yeah, but on you go, John. The division, sorry, are you talking about Latinos voting? Sorry, what's the point of the argument that Latinos?
Is the point not really more about how the Obama presidents fostered division rather than the fact that he's a black man and therefore alienated white people from his cause? Isn't that represented by the changing votes of Latinos in 2016 for Trump, in particular in Florida?
You see, you can argue that Obama was to blame for the polarization of what's happened in America. I don't accept that. I think the blame should be put squarely where it belongs, and that's with the Republican Party. It was the Republican Party, when they were faced with the conspiracy theory that Obama's not in America, he's a Kenyan, he faked his birth certificate. Did the leaders in Congress say this is nonsense? John McCain did. John McCain was an American hero, and he was decent. He called out people who said that Obama wasn't American. But did Newt Gingrich or John Boehner or Paul Ryan and the rest of the congressional leadership tackle this? They didn't. Did they call out the Tea Party when they had placards showing Obama as a monkey? Did they condemn the Tea Party when they sort of posted all sorts of vile, ugly slanders on social media? We've repeatedly seen the failure of the Republican leadership to deal with Fox and right-wing commentators and what's happened in social media. So if you're going to talk about polarization in America, then put it squarely where it belongs, and that's with the Republican Party. The other thing, the point that was raised, I think it was by Julie, about the Democrats were to blame for sort of losing the election and the rest of it. Again, there is some truth in it. I think the blame belongs with Hillary Clinton rather than Obama. When I went to America in 2007, I went to Iowa to see Hillary Clinton for the first time. She was a 30-point lead. I was looking forward to seeing her, the idea of a woman in the White House. And she was a huge disappointment. She was talking to a Democratic audience, and it was all full of platitudes, cliches, really dull speech. And you just sort of felt that she didn't rise to the occasion. So I think the Democratic Party made a mistake. She repeated the same strategy again when she took on Trump. Clinton lost to Trump, not Obama. All the achievements of the Obama years have been mentioned, most of them anyway. The one thing I would say about Obama, and it's a small point compared to the sort of big picture, his time in the White House, there were no sex scandals, at least none that I know about. There was no financial corruption attached to him. He conducted his time in the presidency with dignity, and that's no small thing when you look at the president that followed him.
Thank you very much, Ewan. And may I say at this juncture that I'm delighted to discover that we have found a cure for freshers' flu, which appears to be social embarrassment. What a relief to hear that. We now come to our second round of floor speeches tonight. So if anyone, including the people upstairs tonight, if anyone wants to speak in favour of the motion, please raise your hand now. We have a hand there. Great.
Owen College. I think if achievements outweighing failures is a fairly low bar to set. I mean, he is a president after all, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that a president should serve his people. And so in that logic, a president could do all good things, and if they do not address the problems that the country is facing adequately enough, it can still be a period of regret. So looking at what the Obama years have achieved, a healthcare policy that really doesn't go far enough, and not to mention he has done things that are quite clearly bad. I mean, blowing up civilians abroad. I think regret is the least we can think about those years.
Thank you very much. Now, do you have anyone who'd like to make a floor speech in abstention? There's someone there. Thanks.
I'm Nelly, I'm from Clare. I just want to speak on the point about who's to blame for polarisation in America, whether Obama is or not. And I just think the whole point of polarisation is that it's Obama, or both sides are to blame and not. Polarisation is about each side reacting to one another. So people being racist and then the divisions being raised and then it's all a reaction back and forth. And so I don't know if you can say that is or isn't Obama's fault.
And for our final floor speech tonight, do we have anyone who would like to speak in opposition of the motion? There's a hand right at the back over there, if we can get a mic over there.
Is this working? Yes, it is. Good, I can hear. Harrison from Trinity. Right, so I'd just like to come back to something which the first speaker said, and I know that may sound a bit weird given the side that I'm arguing for, but it was mentioned that Obamacare was great, and indeed it was. I mean, this is a healthcare policy that allowed children up to the age of 26 to stay on their parents' healthcare plans. It was a policy which allowed people with pre-existing conditions to have health insurance for the same rates as most members of society. It is a policy which indeed transformed millions upon millions of lives. It is difficult for us in this country, where we are accustomed to having single-payer healthcare, to truly appreciate just how transformative that is. Perhaps this is arrogant, perhaps it is entitled, but we need to remember that America is, how can I put this, a less advanced country, a country with a very different political system, and a country indeed where perhaps we should set the bar just a little bit lower, especially when we consider the president that followed Obama. Having got that out of the way, was Obamacare a trivial achievement? Was it something which, given Obama's supermajority in Congress, we should expect from somebody of FDR's comparable with FDR? Well, I say yes. After all, FDR in 1935 attempted to give more people health insurance, and he failed. Truman attempted to expand health insurance in America, and he failed. Bill Clinton, of course, attempted to penetrate a wall of congressional opposition, and he and his wife failed. Only Obama succeeded. And he did so, indeed, for most of his time in office, without a supermajority in Congress. He only held that supermajority in the Senate for 7 months. The Minnesota Senate election in 2008 was so close, closer than Florida in 2000, that its senator couldn't be seated until the summer of 2009. The Democrats lost a special election in early 2010, so they only held that supermajority for 7 months. And moving to the House, the median member of the House in 2009 was to the right of where they are today. This idea that Obama inherited enormous congressional majorities, that he could have done whatever he wanted, is rubbish. And for that reason, we should not regret that Obamacare was passed. We should not regret the achievements of the Obama years. We should celebrate them. We should be relieved that anything was done at all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Fabulous. So we come now to our final pair of main speeches tonight. And first up for the proposition is Roshan Panazar. As you all know from your order papers, Roshan is a final year law student at Wolfson College. Previously, he was a historian at the University of Oxford and various other things. He won this slot through open audition. Roshan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening. Now, my first political memory is of President Obama winning the election in 2008. I was 10 years old, and to be honest, at the time, I didn't really know what it all meant. I hadn't the first hoot about what politics was, and my father, handing me the newspaper, pointed at it and said, this is historic. And to me, I didn't know about American race relations. I thought, no, another soup's got into office. But as we have heard previously, and as you all know, it was a truly historic moment, and I echo the praise of the previous speakers for proposition, that he is an incredible individual. So I suppose maybe it's a bit Oedipal that I come here in proposition of the motion that we should regret the Obama years. And before I begin on my main points, I think it's important to get a few things out of the way, particularly about framing, particularly about the word regret, as we've heard so often this evening, and about what it means. When you come to vote, or when you come to think about what this motion means, and indeed when you think about the Obama years, beyond his presidency, we're talking about culture and the economy and other politicians and socially as well. Indeed, in many ways, you could say, despite the passage of 2 more presidents, we are still in Obama's America today. You do not have to think that he was a bad man to vote for a proposition. You do not have to think, you should not be swayed by the idea that John McCain would have been worse, or Mitt Romney would have been worse, or Sarah Palin would have been worse. That is not the motion. This is about his presidency, the years in which he governed, how the world changed, and his actions. And we have to be frank about this. We have to be absolutely frank, because we heard some points from one of the floor speeches and from one of the opposition speeches that we should think about, the impact this might have, or the sort of what other people might think of how you vote and how you get carried today. I very vigorously disagreed. You should vote with your heart, with your gut, with your mind, whatever, just so long as it is true. And so, the 3 points I have to make tonight. First, hubris. Second, missed opportunities. Third, culture under Obama. On all these metrics, under which a lot of his decisions, a lot of his speeches, a lot of what he did generally, a lot of how he carried himself, a lot of the things that we ought to regret about his years can come under these headings. So, we've heard also
My apologies. We've heard also about how he was the most progressive president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We've also heard a lot about the Republicans and how he was up against a lot, and he inherited a terrible economy and a very right-wing Republican Party that many presidents before Clinton didn't have to have. But the crucial thing when it comes to assessing his legacy is that this is a test of leadership. It is about how he responded to the plate that he was dealt, and it is how he acted in the national interest. And I think we submit on proposition that his actions were wanting. And we heard FDR's name. We would disagree. I would disagree on proposition. You look at some of the presidents from 50 years ago, some of the presidents yours or our parents would have grown up under, Ford, Carter, Nixon. Many of them had much more progressive legacies than Obama did on civil rights, on affirmative action, on Native American rights, on busing, on women's rights. Now, obviously, it was a different time, so they might not have come to exactly where we are today. But if you look at from where they changed from to where they changed to, it was arguably more of a change than Obama ever made. So, on hubris and hypocrisy, I think this comes up as a lot can be encapsulated through this. The first is this idea that he had, and I think if you've watched a lot of his videos, you'll see it. He talks about the arc of history bending towards progress, and he often sits there in his chair or at a stand doing that, drawing a graph. Now, I respectfully submit that the arc of history, in the words of Patrick Porter, bend towards delusion. Because ultimately, if you look, as we have mentioned, at his achievements, at home and abroad, they have been trumpeted to an extent that they ought not to be trumpeted to. Let's have a first look at health insurance and healthcare. Yes, it's true that America is a more right-wing country. Yes, it's true that they have the Western European styles of social democracy. And yes, it's true that more people, including members of my family who live in the United States, got better healthcare because of Obamacare. But let that not fool you to the extent that Obamacare is not the be-all and end-all. It is ultimately just a step, and a step which 28 million people are still uninsured, that drug prices are still rocketing high, that people die today because they cannot get enough insulin they need. And so through looking at how these shortfalls in his policy exist, it can help us become the better well, not help us become, because we're not American, well, not all of us here are American, but it can help people when they discuss American politics, when they discuss British politics, to become better angels of their nature, to become that shining city on a hill. And when you look again at his leadership, and you see how he campaigned on yes, we can, and this is a riposte to the people who said, well, the Republicans, the circumstances. He campaigned on yes, we can. He campaigned on a public option. And yet so often when he was in office, it seemed like the answer he gave was no, we can't. No, it's the Republicans. No, it's the economy. Indeed, the earlier speaker of the proposition mentioned his lack of bipartisanship or his inability to get it through. He didn't just fail on bipartisanship or lean too much into it. For instance, with John Boehner, he didn't even go for golf or socialize with these people, which, sure, maybe John Boehner and the Freedom Caucus and the Tea Party might not have been particularly amenable to what he had to say. But if he had gone to socialize with them, to speak to them, to at least find out what they are about, he would have ultimately seen what he was up against, and that might have cloaked a bit of his naivety. On foreign policy, looking abroad, we've heard about how short-lived these items are, and this applies too to his domestic legacy, such as DACA, which was executive orders, or the climate, which was executive orders too. But if you look abroad, while there was soaring rhetoric about America returning to the world stage, repairing the issues that Bush had dealt on the world and the damage to American leadership, you have Libya, you have Syria, you have the repeated use of drone strikes abroad. Now it's true, Trump continues to use drone strikes, Bush used drone strikes, but truly it was Obama who normalized the use of drone strikes and continued to use them in a way that went unchallenged by a lot of people in the American establishment. And I think it's worth just reflecting on that, on murder abroad, when you come to cast your vote, because this was an important legacy of the Obama administration, of permanent war and permanent conflict abroad. And when you weigh that up, top that up with his soaring rhetoric, I think you'll find a mismatch between the two. And we've heard as well on missed opportunities. And indeed, I submit to you all that he is the last corporate Democratic president, purely because you look at his lack of achievement, or the achievements he did make. They were all heavily stunted by a willingness to bend over to corporate America. And where can you see that, obviously? Where can you see this hypocrisy and this hubris? It is the fact that you see his people who worked in administration for health ended up lobbying for the healthcare industry. I'll take you in a moment. People who worked on telecommunications in his administration ended up lobbying for the telecommunications industry. People who worked for intellectual property ended up lobbying for the telecommunication industry. There are also no groomings of successors. Sure, you can take it.
So I concede to you, as I did earlier, that there were a lot of things that Obama didn't do right. But considering that the proposition is attempting to imply that there were missed opportunities, things we could have done better, things we could have achieved, could the proposition provide an outline of some plausible circumstances in which Obama could have achieved more than he did, could have done more than he actually did end up doing, and could have broken through the Republican wall of opposition, instead of just saying that he should have?
Well, this is, I'm afraid, I think, a false piece of framing. I can't stand here tonight, none of us can stand here tonight and go, well, here's a counterfactual, here is our prospect, if I were American president, here's what I'd do. But what we can do is look at the historical record. We can see what he did and the failures that lay down. And I think on that issue, you can see the amount of people who are still uninsured in America, the amount of people who have suffered when DACA was revoked by Trump, the amount of people who will continue to suffer under the effects of climate change as Obama's climate legacy is destroyed, or has been destroyed, and the momentum's not going to come back. Yep.
Okay, so fundamentally you're comparing Obama to this ideal president in your head, and you're saying that you cannot compare him to anything else. But you can compare him to John McCain, you can compare him to Mitt Romney. I think all of us would agree that it would have been much better not have a Trump-esque Republican Party, which was anti-democratic, allowed into the White House 8 years before it did with Sarah Palin in vice presidency. I think it's sort of obvious that you're trying to compare Obama to this ideal which no longer exists, which cannot exist, and really you have some quite obvious counterfactuals in front of you which you just refuse to look at.
Well, I'll finish by saying this, is that when it comes to the issue of this motion, of how you regret, it's not saying that another president could have done it better. It's facing the future. It's saying that these things have got to change in America, and only through expressing regret about how these things have failed, how such a historic president fell short in many ways, can Americans in the future and people in the future in politics understand how to get better, how to make things better, and how to build that shining city on a hill and leave a progressive legacy. So when you cast your vote, I would urge you to think of that and think of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roshan. Apropos of nothing, I should just remind the audience that if you make a point of information tonight, you do generally sit down once you have made it, as a general point of information. Now, we come to our final speaker of the night, from Mr. Freddie Poser. Freddie is a fourth-year undergraduate at Gomblin Keys, studying management. He's a former chair of the Cambridge University Liberal Association and sits on the University Council. Freddie, the floor is yours.
You'll notice that there are 2 student speakers on my side today, and that's because tonight I have some really big shoes to fill. Unfortunately, Jason Furman, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors and professor at Harvard, had to drop out, so you're stuck with me. Barack Obama once described Furman as one of the most brilliant economic minds of his generation. To my knowledge, Obama has never said something quite so nice about me. Difficult as may be, I'll try to fill those shoes, at least partially. My colleagues have made some excellent points on my side about some of Obama's greatest accomplishments during his tenure, so I'll simply focus on the time that he saved the world. But first, I want to set some things straight. I found it really interesting that we have three speakers so plugged into politics who seem so obtuse, deliberately or otherwise, about the political reality of Obama's term. It isn't true, as one of the floor speakers said, that, no thank you, that we had, that there was some sort of, it's the Cambridge Union. It's not true that there was some sort of great supermajority for 2 full years of Obama's term, at which point he could have rammed through legislation that no other president had managed to do before. It's not like every Democratic senator and member of the House was in lockstep on Obama's policy agenda here. And I think I want to focus on one phrase that really summed up the failings in the proposition's case to me. It wasn't Obama's fault. We actually heard that a lot more from the proposition than you did from our side, because time and time again, they focused on the fact that the wording of the motion, as my colleague said, is ambiguous. It says that we regret the Obama years. Well, I stubbed my toe in 2011. Does that mean that that is relevant evidence that I regret the Obama years? I don't think it can be. For this motion to make sense, we have to be judging Obama and what he was able to do in the context he was given. One other point of rebuttal, I think that running through John's speech was the myth of the noble GOP, one that there was this great, McCain-style GOP that existed prior to Obama's term that was killed off by Trump. And I think that actually, if we look at what's happened to the GOP under Trump, what's happened to politicians who have been in Congress longer than I've been alive, we'll see that that was never true. There was no GOP that could match the ambition and the progressiveness of Obama's term. But I want to move now to Obama's economic policy. In his landmark work of political philosophy, William Billy Joel stated, "We didn't start the fire." And in many ways, I think that this 1989 piece captures well the economic inferno that the Obama administration faced on January 20th, 2009. We shouldn't discount the scale of this crisis. Many of us here, including me, will only have vague memories of the start of the response to the 2008 crash. But the world's economy really did teeter on the edge of complete collapse. Before he was even elected, Obama took the bold decision to support Bush's broadly unpopular bank bailout, not making political hay, but doing the right thing to protect the global financial system. Within his first 100 days, Obama passed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, pumping $800 billion into the US economy. Not a single House Republican voted for the bill. The stimulus was unprecedented, twice as big as the Louisiana Purchase and the Marshall Plan combined. It's not true that this simply could have been bigger. It was, that's the energy crisis for you. It's not true that this plan simply could have been bigger. In fact, it was 4 times as big as Barack Obama's own campaign promises. Don't let hindsight blind you to the fact that at the time, this was an absolutely incredible feat to get this passed within 100 days of his election and get 3 Republican senators on side to do it. This legislation touched every single aspect of the American economy. Huge investments in infrastructure, creating and supporting thousands of jobs directly and laying the economic framework for many more. Upgrading and renovating crumbling government buildings, increased unemployment benefits, money for food stamps and money for those receiving Social Security, and it didn't stop there. Obama took the opportunity to plow billions into alternative and renewable energy whilst improving the energy efficiency of homes across the US. It's not true there was no climate action under Obama. It was bold and it was really important. The bill also recognized the importance of research and gave a massive boost to American science. He also, as actually one of the speakers for the proposition pointed out, bailed out the auto industry with a politically risky $80 billion total bailout. That saved thousands of jobs in core areas that would have otherwise completely decayed. Now I'll take your point, John.
It's just a factual one, which is that the Obama stimulus is
It's absolutely true. The Biden stimulus is bigger. But the fact is that politics is the art of the possible, and what is possible now, what is within the Overton window, to use an abused phrase, is completely different because of the Obama stimulus. In fact, it was pointed out that people talk about the lessons learned from the Obama stimulus. Well, the lesson was learned that we should have gone bigger, but that doesn't mean you could have gone bigger at the time. Were this the States, if I were in the House here, I'd have some ridiculously large charts I could point to, or maybe a snowball to prove global warming doesn't exist or something. But in this House, you're just going to have to trust me when I say that unemployment was well over 7.5% when Obama took office, and when he left, it was below 5% and continued to fall for years afterwards. It's not true that the recovery from the Great Recession was particularly slow, because comparing it to the last 11 recessions since the Great Depression leaves out that it was the biggest recession since the Great Depression. Its direct comparator is the Great Depression, from which we recovered significantly more quickly, and Obama's America recovered more quickly than the rest of the world. Now, when we think about the recession, how bad the recession could have been, that's the point I just made. On some indicators, the 2009 crisis was worse than the opening of the Great Depression, but thanks to smart economic policy and a protracted 10-year-long crisis was averted. He also didn't stop there. He oversaw the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act, a comprehensive reform of the US financial regulation protecting consumers and citizens from risky banking practices. The law stands between the global financial system and collapse, and it was an effective response to help ensure the crisis doesn't come back. These are all figures and statistics and abstract points, but they hide the fact that beneath this there are real people whose lives were changed forever by Obama's presidency, who were able to eat, who were able to eat and feed their children and heat their homes because he saved their job, because he gave them $250 on Social Security. Both in the short and the long term, Obama alleviated the suffering of millions. Let's talk about what it would mean for this House to regret the Obama years. Regret is a high bar to meet, and I don't think that divorcing this debate from the political context of 2009 is relevant, and I think that if we did it, this debate would be quite boring. Because the fact is that politics is about making choices, and you have to choose which alternative is going to make people's lives better. McCain would not have been better. He wouldn't have delayed some Trumpist revolution. He was not a miracle worker, and in fact, the steps towards Trumpism have been evident in the GOP since at least the years of Nixon. We saw what the Republican Party looks like. They're showing it to us. Even during 2008 to 2012, we saw that they do have no interest in good governance. They have no interest in bipartisanship. They care about blocking democratic progress. For all his faults, failings, and fuck-ups, when presented with some of the toughest choices, I believe the opposition have shown that Barack Obama made the right calls, took the difficult decisions necessary to protect people's lives and people's livelihoods in the aftermath of the crisis. No, thank you. And I also think that we've made, the positive case for what Obama did achieve, not just in the context of the crisis. Obama's accomplishments and the number of lives that they've touched and improved are too many to list in one debate. But if you're a gay man in the US military, you don't regret the Obama years. If you're one of the millions who now have health insurance thanks to the Affordable Care Act, you don't regret the Obama years. If you care about action on climate change, you don't regret the Obama years. If you're a dreamer who is still in the US, you don't regret the Obama years. If you're Osama bin Laden, well, maybe not that one. But I'm okay with that. For so many of the most vulnerable in the US, regretting the Obama administration is not an option they have. We shouldn't regret it either. If you care about economic justice or a functioning financial system, about the livelihoods of thousands of auto workers or equal pay for women or improved relations with Iran and Cuba, you don't regret the Obama years. No president is perfect. No president can get every call right or go far enough on every issue. But compare the America and the world of January 20th, 2009 to the America of January 20th, 2017, and you'll see how much we owe to Obama. So when you walk through those doors, remember, if you care about progress, you don't regret the Obama years.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our debate tonight. We've chosen an interesting night to have a cataclysmic lighting failure, which is part and parcel of the fun of this place. What I should say that I think is rather important is that for those of you who aren't yet members or who are interested in sort of checking us out and have come here tonight for the purposes of that, we still have just under a week to go of our open period, so the remaining events over the next 6 days remain free to all for non-members to come in and check us out. And you can see everything we have planned over the next few days on our Facebook page. Of course, as part of that, the one thing that I am probably contractually obliged to say is that there is still 6 more days, therefore, of discount on the membership price. You can join if you're a fresher for £185, or if you're a second year for £155. In terms of going through here and voting and casting your vote and having your say, the way this works is you walk through the nose, abstentions is in the middle, and then the ayes door down there. Our lovely events management officers will record your vote as you go through, and I will announce it in the bar if my voice can hold on that long later, and we'll find out who has won tonight. In the meantime, thank you all ever so much for coming. It's been a delight to see you all here, and I hope to see you around again soon. Thank you.